Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Don Ma. The White House says Iran is increasingly eager to come to the negotiating table. What we know about whom the U.S. is talking to at the moment. Most TSA agents now receiving back pay while the DHS shutdown continues. Border Czar Tom Homan says ICE agents will stay until operations return to normal. A high-stakes case headed to the Supreme Court this week. Justices set to decide whether children born in the U.S. automatically get citizenship. Another bomb threat forces Shenyang Performing Arts cancellation in Toronto. Organizers blame a growing campaign linked to the Chinese Communist Party aimed at stopping audiences from seeing the show.
This is NTD Newsroom, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. Our first story, President Trump giving updates about Operation Epic Fury. He says negotiations with Iran are going well, and they've agreed to let some ships pass through the Strait of Hormuz. Here's more.
President Trump says talks with Iran are going very well. The president telling reporters aboard Air Force One the U.S. is negotiating directly and indirectly.
They've agreed to send 8 boats 2 days ago, and then they added another 2, so it was 10 boats. And now today they gave us as a tribute, I don't know, I can't define it exactly, but they gave us, I think out of a sign of respect, 20 boats of oil, big boats of oil, going through the Hormuz Strait, and that's taking place starting tomorrow morning.
President Trump also saying the U.S. military is having enormous success, decimating the Iranian Navy and Air Force. Central Command says it has struck more than 11,000 targets inside Iran since the start of Operation Epic Fury. This weekend, the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli arrived in the region carrying U.S. sailors and Marines. So far, no American or Israeli troops have been deployed on the ground. The Speaker of the Iranian regime's parliament saying the U.S. and its allies in the region would face retaliation in the event of a ground assault. Israel says over the past day it has sent more than 150 fighter jets to strike Iranian targets, including weapons development sites and military research facilities. Pakistan, meanwhile, announcing it will soon host talks between the U.S. and Iran. Pakistani officials have said their public effort follows weeks of diplomacy behind the scenes. There's been no immediate word from Washington or Tehran. The U.S. Embassy in Iraq issuing a new security alert. It's warning Iran-backed terrorist militias may try to target the American universities in the country. It comes after Iran threatened to target American universities across the Middle East. The notice says Iran-aligned terrorist militias have conducted widespread attacks on U.S. citizens throughout Iraq and urges citizens to leave the country immediately. It adds that the Iraqi government has not prevented terrorist attacks against the United States and regional countries from Iraqi territory. Airspace is currently closed over Iraq, the embassy directing U.S. citizens to use land border crossings with Jordan, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent saying the global oil market is well supplied, with more boats traveling through the Strait of Hormuz. Here's the Secretary on Fox News this morning.
The market is well supplied, and we are seeing more and more ships go through on a daily basis as individual countries cut deals with the Iranian regime for the time being. But over time, the U.S. is going to retake control of the straits. Any supply is helpful, and we want to get back to normal.
Bessent's comments came as President Donald Trump issued another warning to Iran. On a Truth Social post this morning, the president says Washington is in, quote, serious discussions with Iran's more reasonable regime, urging Tehran's new leaders to reach an agreement and reopen the Strait of Hormuz or risk U.S. attacks on its energy infrastructure, along with possible strikes against its water desalination plants. Trump writes, if for any reason a deal is not shortly reached, which it probably will be, and if the Hormuz Strait is not immediately open for business, we will conclude our lovely stay in Iran by blowing up and completely obliterating all of their electric generating plants, oil wells, and Karg Island, and possibly all desalination plants.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the Pentagon is preparing options for President Trump to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. Here he is speaking on Good Morning America about the war in Iran.
They are making threats about controlling the Hormuz Straits in perpetuity, creating a tolling system and the like. That's not going to be allowed to happen. And the president has a number of options available to him if he so chooses to prevent that from happening.
The Secretary of State adding the Pentagon is, quote, preparing optionality for the president for this and various other contingencies that might arise. He says this is standard procedure, and Rubio is not disclosing what these options are. Meanwhile, he's also not disclosing whom in Iran is the U.S. speaking to. He says this might get these people in trouble. Rubio confirming there are fractures within Iran, that some people in Iran are willing to move in a different direction for their country. The Secretary of State stressing that Operation Epic Fury is ahead of schedule and that it should achieve all its goals in a matter of weeks, not months.
And President Trump warning Iran if a deal is not reached and if the Strait of Hormuz is not immediately opened, the U.S. will obliterate their electric plants, oil wells, and Karg Island. Joining us now is geopolitical strategist Darren Gobb. He's a retired lieutenant colonel who served in the U.S. Army as a Black Hawk helicopter pilot and battalion commander. Colonel, good afternoon. What is the impact? What would be the impact on Iran if the U.S., to use Trump's words, obliterated Karg Island?
Well, clearly it would impact 90% of their ability to get oil off of Karg Island and out of Iran, and the financial capability of Iran to keep going. I guess, and that's the challenge. Is now, if you obliterate Karg Island, in essence, you're also attacking the people of Iran and their potential future economically, because that's how Iran stays afloat. And it would take years to replace it. And so that's the risk is, have you moved by doing this, if you do it, or have you moved from attacking the Iranian security apparatus and attacking those things that the Iranian people would need if a regime change were successful, a more cooperative government were put in place, and they needed to rebuild an economy? So I definitely would not be in a hurry to destroy Karg Island and all its infrastructure. I think there are other ways to stop the movement of oil off of that island to the rest of the world. And you can exercise those first before you destroy something that would take years to replace.
But we have to keep in mind right now, this is potentially part of a negotiation tactic. I mean, it's a threat right now. President Trump hasn't taken any action, but he's also considering the option of seizing Iran's Karg Island. If he decides to do that, do you think that would be a better option?
Well, it could be a better option. It would depend on the actual threat that's left on the island now. I know we struck multiple military targets and we're very successful in doing so. The question is Iran trying to sneak something out there that would basically make it back into a fortress. My reports right now are saying they're really not able or capable of doing that. And so this is part of that negotiating tactic also is why the Marines have moved in my opinion, as well as mobilizing the 82nd Airborne Division's single brigade to go in that region to provide the flexibility and options that are most certainly on the table within the Pentagon. Whether they're ever used or not is to be determined. But on the surface, simply seizing and controlling Karg Island would be a whole lot more effective in the long term than destroying it.
Okay, so let me ask you, does that necessarily involve then, does that necessarily mean U.S. troops on Karg Island if President Trump goes ahead with wanting to seize it?
Well, that's certainly a possibility. I mean, you don't want to see American boots on ground in any of this conflict, but you also don't want to automatically rule out options that may be necessary to achieve ultimate and lasting peace through a victory here in this conflict now, because we've invested so much to get this far in destroying their security apparatus in general. If you could move 82nd Airborne and Marines, or maybe both, onto that island and have it be an extraordinary low-risk mission, then I suspect that would certainly be considered over destroying every single thing on the island and the infrastructure that goes with it.
Okay, Colonel, I brought a clip here with me. Here's President Trump talking about a regime change of Iran.
But we've had regime change. You look already, because the one regime was decimated, destroyed. They're all dead. The next regime is mostly dead. And the third regime, we're dealing with different people than anybody's dealt with before. It's a whole different group of people. So I would consider that regime change.
So President Trump says the Iranian regime has changed. Your reaction?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's clearly changed just as far as who the people are that are in charge. And we don't necessarily know who we're talking to, or the general public doesn't know who is getting talked to right now about what could be the future of Iran. And so regime change, sir, it has happened a couple times. The question is, has there been an ideological change along with the removal of those people into something that would be more friendly towards the Middle East, Central Asia, and to the world in general? That is certainly yet to be determined, and that's more of a State Department function than it is a Department of War function. And I think the rest of the public at some point in the future will probably hear about who we've been talking to. But for right now, we can't really share it because in essence, you put their lives at risk by sharing that information in the first place.
Okay, speaking of who the U.S. is talking to, in a press briefing, the spokesperson for Iran's foreign ministry continues to deny negotiations with the U.S. And, you know, Secretary of State Marco Rubio saying that fractures have formed in the country's leadership. Why does Iran continue to deny talks are happening?
Because their audience is internal. It's not the message to the rest of the world. Who they're trying to talk to is the IRGC, what's left of the Quds Force, and the Iranian people, especially those who are ideologically aligned with them, and making sure that they're never seen as negotiating with or even bending at all to Israel and the United States in general. They just simply can't do that. So I would look at that as a message to their own population, not a message to us.
Okay, Colonel, one last thing I'd like to have your comments on. It looks like the Houthis have appeared to enter the conflict directly, and this proxy group launched missiles at Israel. Is that significant in your view or not?
It's significant in that it took this long for them to do so. That's the only surprise I would have. Israel is perfectly capable of handling what the Houthis have left when it comes to interdicting drones or missiles, regardless of size. The Houthis are not going to be able to launch something at Israel that is of significant quantity, and that would change the equation. Where I get more concerned is if they actually start being able to affect traffic up through the Suez Canal again, and the economic impacts to the region and the general security impacts of energy and access globally. But other nations will take note of that, specifically Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and that may actually bring them on board in a more aggressive fashion, working against the Houthis themselves if that happens again. I don't know, but it's certainly a possibility.
Well, Colonel, it's good to hear that you're saying Israel can handle themselves, because it's tackling the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Iran all at the same time. But it's good to hear your analysis today, Colonel. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Don. Have a good day.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more news. Stay with us. You don't want to miss what we have to tell you in just a moment.
The 8th NTD International Piano Competition welcomes distinguished pianists from around the world, celebrating the depth, discipline, and expressive power of the Baroque, classical, and romantic repertoire. September 1st through the 5th, 2026, New York City. Apply at piano.ntdtv.com, honoring the timeless tradition of the piano.
What if kids in America didn't have to go to bed hungry tonight? What if our moms, dads, and grandparents could put healthy food on the table every day to help us grow strong? What if all of our friends and neighbors had fresh food too, and there was no hunger at all in America? And what if there was a way today for you to help? Call now or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, just 63 cents a day. So many of us don't have enough food to eat, but your monthly gift means families across the country and in your community can fill plates with food. Kids can get healthy meals year-round, even when school's out, and our neighbors can have fresh food. food that moms, dads, entire families need to thrive. But right now, more people are facing hunger. Feeding America works from coast to coast with partner food banks, food pantries, and meal programs. It takes all of us to make that happen. Will you help too? Please call the number on your screen or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give just $19 a month, and we'll send you this free canvas grocery bag. It's our way of saying thank you for helping to end hunger for our neighbors. Because no kid, no mom or dad, nobody should go hungry in America. Nobody. So what if today was the day you could help nourish futures for our friends, our families, for all of us? Ending hunger is possible. What if we end it together? Call or give online today at helpfeedingamerica.org and your gift can be doubled. Thank you.
Even the mighty might not see it coming. It's prediabetes, and it captures 1 in 3 adults. But you can escape. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test to know where you stand and prevent or delay type 2 diabetes. Be your own hero on smartphones everywhere at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Fighter jets scrambled after a civilian plane entered restricted airspace near President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. Officials say the aircraft flew into a temporary flight-restricted zone yesterday. NORAD says flares were deployed to get the pilot's attention. The military says those flares are safe and pose no risk to people on the ground. The aircraft was then escorted out of the area without further incident. NORAD says the situation was resolved safely and is reminding pilots to follow all airspace restrictions. Dozens arrested in LA after cement blocks were thrown at police officers at a so-called No Kings rally, a protest against the Trump administration's policies. The Los Angeles police taking people into custody after they refused to leave the Saturday riot. The LAPD said 66 adults and 8 juveniles were arrested for failure to disperse the scene of a riot in downtown LA. Another person was arrested for possession of a dirk or dagger during the protest. Police officers were targeted by rioters with rocks, bottles, and cement blocks. 2 officers had to receive medical care after rioters struck them with cement blocks. 2 were arrested and charged with assaulting federal law enforcement, which is a felony. The Department of Homeland Security says there were initially around 1,000 people taking part. 1 person spray-painted death threats to ICE agents on the side of a federal building, encouraging others to kill their local ICE agent. ICE reacted by saying, if you threaten ICE or their families, you will face the full force of federal law. Meanwhile, in Denver, police made 9 arrests during a No Kings protest, which included a person throwing objects. Most TSA agents received back pay today. Meanwhile, White House border czar Tom Homan says ICE agents will continue to help at airports during the ongoing shutdown until operations return to normal. Here he is speaking to CNN.
We got to keep the airport safe. We got to keep the American people, going through those lines. So, and ICE is helping, shorten those lines and adding security to each and every airport around the country. And look, I've been on Capitol Hill talking to both sides, and bottom lines, they want changes in ICE tactics. They want changes in policies. But why can't they continue these discussions and open the Department of Homeland Security while we do that? They're holding the department hostage because they don't like what ICE is doing. And ICE is enforcing the laws they enacted. If they don't like what ICE is doing, then change the law. That's your job.
The help from ICE comes as TSA workers face financial strains from missed paychecks during the shutdown. The partial shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security began back in mid-February. It's led to long lines and staffing shortages at airports across the country. And it appears there's no end in sight to the partial government shutdown, which is now officially the longest in history. A series of late-night votes on Capitol Hill last weekend showed sharp divisions between the House and Senate. Now some are calling for new Senate leadership. NTD's Melina Weisskopf has the latest from Washington, D.C.
Funding for the Department of Homeland Security in limbo after senators cut an overnight deal and left town for the Easter recess.
The stereotype of Congress is, and it's well deserved, is that we pass stuff in the dark of night because we don't have any guts, and that's clearly what's shown in the Senate leadership. I think they need to get some new leadership over there, in my opinion.
House lawmakers rejected the Senate's late-night deal, instead passing a short-term measure. It would fund the entire DHS for the next 8 weeks.
We're not going to split apart two of the most important agencies in the government and leave them hanging like that. We just couldn't do it.
Senate Democrats immediately shot down the plan, saying it's dead on arrival in their chamber.
And it is unconscionable to me that the Democrats would force some sort of negotiation at 3 o'clock in the morning and try to hoist this upon the American people and then get on their jets and go home for their holiday.
The president has sided with House Republicans, calling the Senate deal to delay ICE funding inappropriate.
Fired when the Senate passed the DHS funding bill?
It's a shame. They should really just go to a filibuster. They should terminate the filibuster. And they should vote. That's what I think. Look, I think the Senate is playing it too soft.
Senator Mike Lee now calling for the president to use his constitutional authority to force senators to reconvene. In a post writing, interrupting their recess and forcing them to debate DHS funding on the Senate floor would apply pressure. We can't reward unprecedented obstruction with 2-week recesses. At the center of the stalemate is a disagreement over ICE policy. Democrats previously rejected the White House's proposal, which met most of their demands, except for the removal of agents' masks and judicial warrant requirements.
What we want to see is ICE conducting themselves like every other cop, police officer, and law enforcement agency in the country.
Republicans have drawn a line on these two issues, insisting that masks protect agents from doxing and judicial warrants would bog down enforcement operations.
The same laws that ICE follows today, the same laws about immigration enforcement, have been in place during the Clinton, Obama, and now. The laws hasn't changed. And the things we're talking about, they want to prevent ICE from doing their job.
The disagreement between the House and the Senate has prolonged the DHS shutdown to become the longest in history. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Secure elections taking center stage, President Trump outlining the latest on the Save America Act. With reporters aboard Air Force One, NTD's Daniel Monahan has the key takeaways.
The Save America Act would enforce new proof of citizenship and ID requirements for federal elections. President Trump saying it's a no-brainer.
You have to have it. The Save America, voter ID, all of these things, proof of citizenship. It's an 87% issue with all voters, including Democrats. The only ones that don't want it are Schumer and these corrupt Democrat leaders, because it will not give them the ability to cheat in an election.
Critics say it could disenfranchise millions of eligible voters, the president dismissing those concerns.
Look, why wouldn't you want voter ID? There's not a reason in the world you wouldn't want it except to cheat. And if they don't cheat, their policy is so bad they'll never win another election.
President Trump also renewing calls to end the Senate filibuster, a rule requiring 60 votes to advance most legislation.
But I say end the filibuster, terminate the filibuster, just vote, and you'll get everything you want. You get all 5 things. We have voter ID, we have proof of citizenship. It's so important. Mail-in ballots have to be stopped.
There would be exceptions for those in the military, the sick or disabled, or those who are traveling. The bill also addresses cross-sex procedures for minors and women's sports.
We don't want men playing in women's sports. The Democrats do. We don't want transgender mutilization of our children. The Democrats are just fine with it. You could do every child in America, they'd be very happy.
The president expressing confidence in House Speaker Mike Johnson, while urging him to secure the votes needed to move the agenda forward.
He's a high-quality person. And he told me the same thing, we don't have the votes. Well, he's only a couple of votes short, but that's what being a leader is. You have to get the votes. You have to get the votes.
President Trump also discussing paying TSA workers from the big beautiful bill.
We're going to pay them for as long as we have to, and I will tell you, the ICE workers have been amazing.
Senator Mike Lee recently discussing the Save America Act, speaking on Fox News.
Whenever we get back, I've been assured that Save America, assuming we get the DHS thing funded, it'll be the first thing up after DHS is fully funded.
Lee says few issues unite Americans like voter ID, with 83% of all Americans supporting it.
American elections are for American citizens. This is an assertion that's so elementary that its controversy is itself the only remarkable feature.
The Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, introduced by Lee and co-sponsored by Lindsey Graham, passed the House in February by a narrow margin, with one Democrat joining Republicans. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
A high-profile case heading to the Supreme Court this week. Justices will hear arguments on whether all children born in the U.S. could automatically receive citizenship. The case challenges President Trump's January 2025 executive order seeking to end birthright citizenship for children of illegal immigrants. Here's more.
In a Truth Social post this morning, the president commented on the upcoming hearing, writing, quote, "Birthright citizenship is not about rich people from China and the rest of the world who want their children and hundreds of thousands more for pay to ridiculously become citizens of the United States of America. It is about the babies of slaves." He adds, quote, "We are the only country in the world that dignifies this subject with even discussion. Look at the dates of this long ago legislation, the exact end of the Civil War. The world is getting rich selling citizenships to our country, while at the same time laughing at how stupid our U.S. court system has become." And a court decision is not expected for months, but the outcome could affect millions of Americans and generations of citizens. We will be live streaming the full court hearing on Wednesday, April 1st, starting 10 a.m. Eastern Time right here on NTD. Don't miss it.
The Treasury Department is targeting fraud in government health care programs such as Medicare and Medicaid. In an advisory today, the department is urging financial institutions to be vigilant. Here's more on that.
The advisory explains how transnational criminal organizations execute health care fraud. It says such organizations register healthcare providers in the U.S. using foreigners, obtain the names of beneficiaries illicitly, then file false and fraudulent claims for reimbursement. It says these schemes usually involve financial insiders as well as complicit medical professionals who receive kickbacks and bribes. The Treasury Advisory highlights money laundering red flags to help financial institutions identify and report suspicious activity. Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent says, quote, "Treasury will continue to find and disrupt fraud schemes wherever they exist, and we will work with our law enforcement partners to hold perpetrators accountable."
The Justice Department is suing Minnesota over policies that allow boys to compete in girls' sports. The DOJ accuses the State Departments of Education and High School Sports League of violating Title IX. According to the complaint, Minnesota has engaged in sex-based discrimination by requiring girls to compete against boys in athletic competitions. The lawsuit also accused the state of allowing boys to access girls' locker rooms and bathrooms. Title IX prohibits sex-based discrimination in any education program or activity that receives federal funding. According to the DOJ, Minnesota's Education Department receives more than $3 billion of federal money annually. In a post on X, Attorney General Pam Bondi said, quote, "This DOJ acknowledges biological reality, and we refuse to let high school girls be subjected to this treatment." Bondi continued, quote, "It's not only unfair, it's deeply inappropriate and dangerous." Energy shortages could hit Europe by next month, says Shell's CEO. We talked to a European economist about this after the break. Stay with us.
Looking for a healthy and smooth-tasting brew? Drop by Days Coffee Roasters today and explore our wide selection of specialty-grade small-batch roasted coffee. Home to North America's first enzyme-fermented coffee, we source a wide selection of specialty-grade coffee beans from around the world, and our baristas are ready to craft your customized brew. Visit Days Coffee at 28 North Street, Middletown, New York. Come experience a brew like no other.
There's cultures that have been lost. But this culture hasn't been. The artist is showing us our sense of who we are, where we came from. You look at his hat. His hat is knitted probably by a man, because a man traditionally knitted the hats. That hat tells you the story of who this person is, what his place in the culture is, the animals around him. Everything's all contained in the messages in the hat. And the tool that he's carrying over his shoulder. This is a centuries-old tool that has been able to rework the mountains. Those traditions are invaluable, and if we don't honor those traditions, then we're rootless. The artist is showing us the value of maintaining our culture and respecting our culture.
You can talk to me if you're feeling sad.
Thanks for hearing me out, bro.
Whenever you need to talk, I'm here, okay?
The White House says Iran has been in talks with the administration as the U.S. military continues to destroy Iran's defense industrial base. Here's Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt earlier today.
It's no surprise that we are seeing the remaining elements of the regime become increasingly eager to end the destruction and come to the negotiating table while they still can. Despite all of the public posturing you hear from the regime and false reporting, talks are continuing and going well.
The White House says the U.S. military has so far struck more than 11,000 Iranian targets and reduced Iran's ballistic missile and drone attacks by roughly 90%. It also damaged or destroyed nearly 70% of Iran's missile, drone, and naval production facilities and shipyards. The press secretary warns that if Iran rejects a deal with the U.S., President Trump has every option available to ensure the regime pays a grave price. She elaborated on the president's post that the U.S. is in serious discussions with a new and more reasonable regime in Iran.
How confident are you that they are legitimate and have enough grip on power? Marco Rubio said earlier that he's not sure and it's not clear whether they will be in power. So are you also talking to other factions? As the president is trying to make a deal, how do you ensure that you're making a deal with the people who can actually implement it?
Well, that's part of the ongoing process that's taking place. And the ongoing negotiations, of course, anything that they say to us privately will be tested, and we will ensure that they are being held accountable to their word. And if they are not, the president has laid out the military consequences that the Iranian regime will see if they don't hold true to the words that we are hearing privately behind the scenes.
The White House also clarifying the situation in the Strait of Hormuz. Leavitt says Iran was not the one that picked which oil tankers could go through the strait. She says the latest 20 oil tankers that were allowed to pass are a result of the administration's diplomatic efforts. And multiple European nations saying reopening the Strait of Hormuz is critical at this time, and Iran once again firing a ballistic missile toward NATO territory. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pastor has the latest on the international impact of the Iran war.
We are working on a viable plan for the Straits of Hormuz, which I want to come back to.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer saying reopening the Strait of Hormuz is the single most effective way to bring down energy prices.
But it is our duty to protect British citizens, particularly their concern will be not just the escalation of the war, but this sense that it's going to hit them and their families and their households. And I think probably uppermost in their minds at the moment is energy bills.
The Chancellor of Germany also placing high importance on reopening Hormuz, suggesting Germany would assist a US plan to reopen the strait.
Germany will, of course, be ready to make its contribution to ensuring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. We have already put forward extensive proposals on this matter. I would expressly suggest that we do so within the framework of an international contact group.
Also on Monday, Iran once again firing a ballistic missile toward NATO territory. A spokesperson for the Western Alliance saying NATO again successfully intercepted the missile heading to Turkey. The spokesperson added that NATO is prepared for such threats and will do what is necessary to defend its allies.
All flight plans that involved actions related to the operation in Iran were rejected, every single one of them, including those of refueling aircraft.
NTD sister media, the Epoch Times, received a White House statement on the matter. The White House says the US is meeting all of its goals in Iran and does not need help from Spain or anyone else. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Energy shortages could hit Europe by next month. This is according to Shell's CEO. Joining us now to talk about the impact of the Iran war on Europe is Daniel Lacalle, chief economist at Tressis Hedge Fund, international financial analyst, and author of the book Freedom or Equality. Daniel, always good to see you. Hope you had a great weekend. So I just want to ask you, what has been the Iran war's impact, the main impact in Europe in terms of energy?
The biggest impact on the European economy comes from the increase in natural gas bills and power price bills. We have seen how European natural gas prices have soared by 55%, not reached the levels of 2022 yet, but unfortunately, this is happening in a period in which the European Union should be injecting for the winter season. No? So the impact is quite severe. You can see, for example, how the European Central Bank has almost doubled its inflation expectations for the Eurozone for 2026 and has slashed the economic growth expectations in a European Union that, as everybody knows, is not in a particular good shape in terms of growth. It was actually almost escaping recession in the latest projections. So the OECD, the ECB, and independent analysts all see the risk of stagnation with rising inflation and obviously hitting consumers in a very tough moment in which consumers are already burdened by the elevated levels of inflation that have been accumulated throughout the past 5 years.
So Daniel, you say Europeans are paying for higher energy prices. Can you compare those prices with what Americans are paying, and why is there a difference?
Yeah, every time I speak with my fellow Americans, I get very envious when they complain about gasoline prices. The average gasoline price in the United States is about $3.8 a gallon. In the European Union, the average is about $5.7 a gallon. But that's not even close to what you can see in many countries in which it can reach to $7.5, $8.5 a gallon, like Denmark, like other countries in the euro area. What is the big difference? The big difference is the enormity of taxes. We have a chain of taxes on hydrocarbons that are making the industry uncompetitive. Industries in Europe pay around 6 times what industries in the United States pay for natural gas and for gasoline. So what we are seeing, for example, is a very large chain of different taxes. At the level of the commodity, we have the CO2 tax. On top of that, we have the tariffs. And on top of that, we have the VAT and the hydrocarbon tax and the so-called green taxes on different elements. So all of those are stacked together, making almost 50%. Actually, in some cases, up to 60% of the price of gasoline paid in taxes and levies. So that is the big problem. The big problem is that what Europe did was to implement what Gavin Newsom wanted to implement in the United States, and Kamala Harris was announcing that was her policy in terms of energy, which was very large carbon taxes and hydrocarbon taxes, which basically make gasoline prices rise very fast when the commodity rises. And this is the key, because taxes are changed, and some are percentage of the price and others are per gallon or per liter. What happens is that when commodity prices rise, the gasoline prices that consumers pay go through the roof. But what's interesting is that when commodity prices fall, the gasoline price the consumer pays doesn't fall as rapidly, and certainly not as much. So it's a monster taxation machine. The energy sector in the European Union has been taxed to obliteration. And what we have seen, obviously, is stagnation, reduction in manufacturing, and loss of jobs.
So what I gather is that these taxes, the hydrocarbon tax, the CO2 taxes, part of Europe's green energy tax policies. That's what I gather here. So I saw a Reuters article today, and I found it very interesting. So it said that Germany's economy and energy minister said the EU's energy transition over the past 2 decades had produced higher systemic costs. So this is what the official said, that European policymakers are increasingly aware that some of these environmental measures are pushing up energy costs. So that's very interesting,
Absolutely.
Daniel. Is this the case right now, that some politicians are saying these things counter to the green energy policy?
Absolutely. We have seen for the first time in years how Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, said that the decommissioning of nuclear plants was a big mistake. We have also seen the energy minister in Germany saying that they may have to go back to increasing coal power generation in order to address the risk of supply, security of supply. All these things have proven that the so-called green policies have only made a very big dent on the industrial fabric of the European Union. And furthermore, they have not been green at all, because let's remember that the European Union continues to be the largest importer of Russian gas by pipe and also by liquefied natural gas. But we also have seen how Germany still uses 22% of its energy mix in coal. So it's not been very CO2 beneficial, because the only way in which the European Union has actually reduced CO2 emission has been by destroying the industry. So as the official said in Germany, and we are hearing more and more voices from Meloni to other officials in the European Union, these wrongly called green policies were basically massive taxation policies that ended obliterating industry and have created a very weak productive and manufacturing economy. And it's a dreadful position. So I think that what at least is good is that what we see is that a few of these officials are starting to turn and are starting to show that, for example, the CO2 tax makes no sense. The European Union is 9% of global CO2 emissions, and 100% of the cost makes absolutely no sense. And again, I come to the point, it's only driven manufacturing and industry away from the European Union, destroyed jobs, created economic stagnation, and driven power prices to levels that Americans would not even think about. I mean, an average household in Europe pays up to 6 times more for electricity and natural gas than in the United States. And the average is 2 and 3 times as much electricity and natural gas.
So, Daniel, I bring up this topic of conversation about green energy policies. I bring it up because do you think the Iran war and the disruption to fossil fuels can be viewed as sort of a test of how renewables work, or how well they don't work when it comes to energy security? Because if it works well, you would think that the energy disruption to fossil fuels would have no impact.
Absolutely. This is what makes no sense, is that everybody is saying that the European Union made a wonderful bet on renewables, and at the same time, we're seeing that it's the most negatively impacted, both in inflation and in growth from the changing commodity prices. Why? Because renewables are volatile and intermittent, which makes you more dependent on natural gas, and as we have seen in Germany, coal, in periods in which you have to fulfill security of supply and peak demand. So the alleged success of having a lot of renewables, which are perfectly acceptable, there's nothing bad about renewables, is the problem is the ideologization of energy that we have seen in the European Union. Is that what we need to understand is that energy policy must comply with the principles of competitiveness, affordability, and security of supply. And the European Union has forgotten the three of them. So renewables are great, but they're only great if you have enough nuclear, enough hydro, enough natural gas, and enough oil in order to guarantee the security of supply required for transport, for energy, primary energy, and also for, obviously, for electricity generation. All these things are very important. Obviously, as you very well said, if those elements of policy would have been successful, today what we would be seeing is that the European Union would be facing lower inflation and higher growth than the United States. And it's the opposite. And what's really important, and the lesson here, is that for global energy needs and for security of supply, energy policy must count with every technology, and that eliminating technologies is a luxury that only bureaucrats can afford.
Okay, Daniel, just one final question here. Do you think the European Union, European countries have reached a point now, more than ever, that they have to make a choice between climate agenda policies and energy security?
I think that they don't have to choose, because what we know so far is that the so-called green energy policies were not green. That is the key thing. The key thing to understand here is that if you really want to be green and to care about the environment, what you need to do is to bet on technology, on competition, and on security of supply. That's the way to do it, not by destroying the industry and creating a PowerPoint type of energy policy. Therefore, I think that we are seeing in France, in Germany, in Italy, a big change in politicians. Politicians are starting to talk about the mistakes made, are starting to talk about the importance of guaranteeing supply instead of fixating policy on a very ideological and radical view of climate that has absolutely nothing to do with protecting the environment. And this is the key factor, is that after hundreds of billions of subsidies, what we are seeing in Germany is that the Germans are talking about adding more coal to the energy mix, that after hundreds of billions of subsidies, we are seeing that everybody is saying, oh, we made a mistake by shutting down nuclear. The problem is that politicians should not dictate energy policy based on radical ideologies. And unfortunately, in the European Union, activists dictated energy policy, and now that has led to destruction of jobs, destruction of industry, and stagnation.
You know, Daniel, when it comes to green energy, I always like to point to this example that China is a significant producer of, whether we're talking about windmills or solar panels, but it continues to use coal. Okay, Daniel,
Absolutely.
Good to speak with you. Yeah. Good to speak with you today, and have a great week.
Same to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
An oil tanker from Russia has arrived in Cuba amid the U.S. blockage. President Trump has approved the relief for the people of Cuba. Here's more.
President, if he loses one boatload of oil, that's all it is. It's if he wants to do that, and if other countries want to do it, doesn't bother me much. It's not going to have an impact. Cuba's finished. They have a bad regime. They have very bad and corrupt leadership. And whether or not they get a boat of oil, it's not going to matter. I'd prefer letting it in, whether it's Russia or anybody else, because the people need heat and cooling and all of the other things that you need.
The Russian oil tanker is carrying 100,000 metric tons of crude oil, and the Trump administration has effectively cut Cuba off from key oil shipments. The country's president says fuel shortages have dragged on for months, forcing strict rationing and worsening a nationwide energy crisis. The situation intensified after the removal of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro in January, cutting off a key source of subsidized oil to the island. Trump says the communist island will fall within a short period of time, saying the U.S. will be there to help it out. The president saying, quote, Cuba is going to be next. The United States reopening its embassy in Caracas, Venezuela. The move following the restoration of full diplomatic relations between the two countries. The embassy had been closed for 7 years. The State Department says normal operations resumed today. A small team of U.S. diplomats had already been working in Caracas for over a month. Officials say the move is part of a broader plan for Venezuela. The State Department calling it a key milestone. Meanwhile, a federal judge is hearing arguments today in a dispute between the Pentagon and major news organizations. The focus of the hearing is on press access and constitutional protections. Here's more.
District Judge Paul Friedman is considering a request from the New York Times to enforce a prior ruling that ordered the War Department to restore journalists' access to the Pentagon. The case stems from a policy introduced under War Secretary Pete Hegseth, warning that reporters could lose credentials if they sought classified information from unauthorized sources. In March, the court found parts of that policy violated constitutional protections for news gathering and due process and ordered press credentials reinstated. The Times now says the Pentagon has not complied, pointing to a revised policy that still limits access and imposes new restrictions. The Pentagon disputes that claim, saying it has addressed the court's concerns.
Shenyun Performing Arts kicked off its Toronto run Saturday with Canadian members of parliament and city councillors among the audience. They brought proclamations and congratulatory letters to mark the company's 12th anniversary. NTD is a proud media sponsor of Shenyun and was there to speak with them. Take a look.
Shenyun Performing Arts opened its 2026 Toronto run at the Four Seasons Centre for the Performing Arts on March 28th. Canadian members of parliament and city councillors attended the performances, presenting proclamations and congratulatory letters to the company.
First time, absolutely incredible. I just love the expression of culture and just a window into the traditional ways of the Chinese culture.
And what I'm thinking when I'm watching it is how many hours it must have taken for them to train and to get the synchronization and the music so perfect.
It's so amazing to see that, 5,000 years ago, we're still celebrating the beauty and the magic of China dances, and the performances tonight are phenomenal. The dancers, they must do so much training. The costumes and the design and the set design are beyond magical.
Shenyun's mission is to revive 5,000 years of Chinese civilization through classical dance and music. As the company marks its 20th anniversary, members of parliament and city councillors have sent congratulatory letters welcoming the company and wishing them great success. Vaughan City Councillor Chris Ainsworth wrote, "Reaching this milestone is a testament to your vision, discipline, and unwavering commitment to artistic excellence." Member of Parliament Michael Gulyemin wrote, "Shenyun revives traditions once nearly lost, offering audiences a glimpse into a world where harmony between heaven, earth, and humanity is cherished."
I've never seen such talented people on stage, and I hope that they keep their journey alive and they keep bringing that window of traditional culture into the present.
Member of Parliament Kostas Menegakis wrote, "I am pleased to commend all those whose dedication, talent, and hard work have made this remarkable milestone possible."
Absolutely fantastic. It was so beautiful. The music was amazing. The dancing was amazing. The old artistry, the singing, the costumes, colorful. Such a beautiful, beautiful display of the beautiful Chinese culture.
Member of Parliament Amarjit Gill wrote, "Your dedication to preserving and sharing traditional art has fostered greater appreciation for cultural expression and storytelling through the performing arts." Member of Parliament Anna Roberts called the anniversary a true testament to your magnificent performances year after year, displaying over 5,000 years of traditional Chinese culture through music, dance, and storytelling.
I think for the 20th anniversary, I am so proud to be here again.
Member of Parliament Rhonda Kirkland wrote, "Your dance continues to keep the legacy of classical Chinese culture alive and inspiring." Based in New York, Shenyun has toured the world since 2006 and has grown to 8 companies performing simultaneously. However, Shenyun cannot perform in China, where the Chinese Communist Party has suppressed traditional culture and persecuted people of faith.
It was a reminder of the freedom we have in Canada, and wouldn't it be wonderful if one day we could get back there in China. The current communist Chinese government reaches beyond China. We know this, and still are persecuting folks outside of China. So we need to do something to stand up for that.
Unfortunately, those kind of situations, political situations, should not interfere with providing the community and the countries of your culture. If you don't display your culture, then people don't learn. So that explains one thing. Nothing can stop them from enjoying your culture, your storytelling, and the performance. So it doesn't matter what they do. People will come to the show.
My thought again is that, we need to have free expression. We need to be able to speak our minds. And this is a performance you can come and see where that is actually happening. And it's nice to see that it's not being stopped, at least here in Canada.
Any culture or any faith group that is persecuted for their beliefs and that continues to persevere through that, it's wonderful and fabulous to see, and it's inspiring.
Shenyun continues at the Four Seasons Center for the Performing Arts in Toronto through April 5th. NTD News, Toronto, Canada.
The military intercepts a civilian aircraft near President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. More in just a moment on NTD Newsroom.
Food. It fuels our bodies, nourishes our spirits, and brings us together. Because we all need nutritious food to thrive.
Food gives me energy and it also helps me focus.
But not everyone knows where their next meal is coming from. And 1 in 7 people in America face hunger. It's tougher than ever for too many of us. But the simple truth is, ending hunger is possible, and it starts with you. Call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, to help families in your community facing hunger. Feeding America works from coast to coast with partner food banks, food pantries, and meal programs. Your monthly gift delivers food where it's needed most, puts fresh food on the table, and helps kids have healthy meals all year round, even when school is out.
You can see the difference with the kids when they're full. Food is everything.
Please call the number on your screen or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org. Give $19 a month. Your first gift can double an impact. And we'll send you this free canvas grocery bag as a reminder of how you're helping to end hunger for good.
When it comes down to it, it's about taking care of your family first and the loved ones that you need to provide for.
Food donations help me tremendously, and I'm very grateful for the food bank.
I have hope. The simple truth is, ending hunger in America is possible. You can help make it happen. The need is urgent. Call or go online now to helpfeedingamerica.org, and your gift can double in impact.
You are not hidden. There's never been a moment you were forgotten. You are not hopeless. Though you have
on streets across America, homeless young people are cold, abused, in danger. Covenant House is helping young people with nowhere else to turn. Please call or go online now with your gift of $19 a month. You'll help provide hot meals, safe shelter, medical care, and love We'll send you this comforting blanket as a reminder of the love you're showing a young person this holiday season. Call or go online now to safeplacetosleep.org, and your first month's gift will be matched.
NTD News, the fastest growing independent news source in America, bringing you breaking news from around.